So, I've been mulling over a lot about Genshin Impact's lore lately, and I've been trying to figure out whether or not I should dive into it on this channel, and I think this is a good place to start. My most recent contention of thought with this game has been centered around the artifacts, mainly because players have been collecting these things for a majority of their playtime with the game. That's hours and hours of time farming, and when I finally asked myself what artifacts actually were in terms of the lore in Genshin, I was quite startled by the fact that I could not really provide an answer apart from them being mechanics to increase player strength in the game. Maybe some of you have already asked yourselves this question, but I want this to be the focus of today's video. Right here, right now, in this episode of The Little Things of Teyvat, we're going to answer the question, what exactly are artifacts? So, let's dive right in because we've wasted enough time as it is acquiring artifacts with godlike substats like attack, crit rate, crit damage, and energy recharge, only to be marred with an HP percent or defense percent main stat. You know exactly which ones I'm talking about, indiscriminate of the set. But let's move away from the dreadful RNG of this game and let's shove on those tinfoil hats because I don't care about how powerful artifacts can be right now. And neither should you. Let's begin by exploring what we know about artifacts first, and then we'll sink our teeth into some good old speculation. So let's begin with a standard definition just so that we're all on the same page, shall we? An artifact is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as an object that is made by a person, especially something of historical or cultural interest. So from this, we can glean that there is some element of age that is significant, which makes sense because the artifacts that we collect all have stories that involve someone in the past of Teyvat using each of these sets. For example, with patch 2.1, we learned that Signora is the witch mentioned in the Crimson Witch of Flames set, so at some point in her past, this set was worn by her. So the nomenclature of artifact is quite appropriate for these things that we've been collecting based on the fact that they are fairly old and are items that we would likely find in a museum. And I'd bet my best artifacts that the majority of the player base stopped right here in terms of bothering to care about what artifacts actually are, but I think we can go much, much deeper than this. Let's move on to the domains themselves, shall we? The typical experience with a domain is that we select our reward level, select our characters, enter the stage, fight some mobs, offer up some resin to the Irminsul tree, and finally, we are blessed with a random artifact. All of that work for godlike substats, only to be marred with HP percent or defense percent main stats. And no, I'm definitely not salty about how many of these I possess. So let's take a look at what is actually happening in this process. We select out our reward level, which I can only surmise is a mechanic of the game unless we're actually communicating with the tree in order to discuss the difficulty of the challenge. I would be enthralled if anyone can actually come up with a lore-centric explanation for this part, but by all means, go knock yourselves out. Selecting our character opens up a whole other big-time theory about the Traveler that I've had the pleasure of discussing with people on the Project Conria Discord, which you should all definitely check out. But what about the mobs? What role do they play? The interesting thing here to remember is that defeating the mobs is not what provides you with the artifact, because you can defeat the mobs and run around and nothing will really happen after that. It's only when you offer the resin to the tree that you are truly blessed with an artifact. I would argue that when you enter the stage, the mobs act like a test by the Irminsul tree to see if you are worthy of its blessings. The mobs themselves are manifestations created by the leyline elemental energy to protect the tree. They're not actual creatures like the ones that we encounter in the overworld, but representations of them. They are pretty much comprised of pure elemental energy. One could argue also that the reason that some mobs pop up over and over again is because the particular mobs are bound to the memories of the artifact. Okay, that's enough speculation because we're not at that part yet. Back to the facts. Once the mobs are defeated, the tree deems you worthy of coming into its presence, but still does not bless you unless you provide it with resin. But what is the Irminsul tree actually blessing us with? Are they actual items that our characters can feel and touch? I'm going to argue in this video that no, but let's dive a little deeper into why I think this. We learn from the game that the ley lines are made of two constructs, memories and pure elemental energy. Both of these make sense in terms of explaining what artifacts are because we know that artifacts are constructed out of the memories from the stories that we read attached to each piece, and they possess a great deal of elemental energy, which is how they empower our characters. Now, I need to lay down a disclaimer here that there are a few concepts that I do need to explain. The first is that when I say elemental energy, I don't mean our conventional pyro, hydro, cryo, electro, animo, and geo, and of course soon to be dendro. I believe that the ley lines consist of an unfiltered elemental energy, kind of like how there are infinite colors sealed within a prism, and you require a light in order to draw them out. As an aside, this same process actually could be how visions form, as one's ambition is linked with the pure elemental energy. That energy is converted into a certain color, and these colors are the different elemental powers that our characters have. This elemental energy could be drawn out using resin like a light source and condenses into reality as an artifact when paired with a certain memory. For example, let's use Signora again. If you go to the domain where the memories of Signora are most concentrated, you get the Crimson Winch of Flames set. Or the domain itself might be able to draw on a specific person's memory to that specific location. Again, nothing in the game specifically states this, but it grants us a pathway to understanding the artifacts better, and there does not appear to be any evidence contradicting this, so bear with me. Also, notice what form the artifacts come in. These are not items that would be effective at protecting any part of the body. The first two are feathers and flowers, which would cover little more than a space on your body the size of your eye. Then we have an hourglass, and who the heck knows how that could protect you unless you're playing League of Legends, and I don't even know if that item is even in the game anymore, but I'm definitely showing my age now. Then there's a goblet, which again, not good for protecting yourself. And finally, the most protective, but still negligent in terms of its overall effectiveness, is the crown or the circlet. So none of these pieces of equipment actually protect you like armor should. In other gacha games, characters' equipment usually consists of weapons, armor, helmets, rings, necklaces, and boots. But Genshin Impact has none of these. So obviously the strength of these artifacts does not come in the shape of their forms, if they have forms at all. All of this leads me to conclude that artifacts are not physical items, but metaphysical constructs consisting of elemental energy and memories. We're not actually collecting a bunch of feathers, flowers, hourglasses, goblets, and crowns, but kind of like an imprint of them from the Irminsul trees. Further evidence that the artifacts are not physical objects is the fact that when you equip them onto your characters, the item does not appear on their bodies in-game. Now, I can already hear the throngs of protesters crying out, "Keeper, that's ridiculous. Just think about how much more work that it would be for miHoYo if they had to generate every single set onto every single character with at least one new one coming out every month." And you're right, it would be a lot more work, but I have a different explanation that is a little bit more lore-centric that I think many of you will appreciate. And also, do remember that miHoYo does animate status effects onto our characters separately from their bodies, so this technology of rendering the artifacts is not outside of their capabilities. Because let's be real here, How many of us would pull out our wallets and freely give away our spending virginities to have our character wearing the fox mask that we acquired from Ayaka's side quest? Yeah, all of us would. Let's quickly open up the character menu and take a look at any one of our characters. Do you see anything of interest? No? Of course you wouldn't, because these are screens that we've blasted through countless times without ever batting an eye. But take a look a little closer and be punishingly critical. Can you spot anything now? Our characters appear to be praying. In fact, every single one of them is doing the exact same pose, and this might be quite significant. Again, Keeper, this is done so that miHoYo does not have to animate every character with the same pose. That would be way too much work. And I would agree with you again if our characters were not praying at all and just standing there. But no, they are very intentionally praying, or at least thinking about something with their eyes closed and their hands clasped together. Why create this animation at all if the equipment screen does not need any animations at all? There must be a reason, right? Also, what about the artifacts themselves? Do you notice anything about them? That's right. They're trapped in little bubbles floating around our character, to which the outcries continue. Keeper, this is a stylistic choice to show our artifacts in a really cool way and an artistic way too. Of course, again, that's possible, but there could be a lore-centric reason for this too. Let's combine this with our observation that the characters are praying, or at least meditating on something, and see what we get. It's almost as if our characters are closing their eyes and thinking about the artifacts themselves. And since these non-physical artifacts are created from memories and pure elemental energy, this actually makes a lot of sense why our characters are acting this way in these menus. The bubbles represent our characters' thoughts, which contain the memories of an artifact that belonged to an individual in the past. These memories and elemental energy then empower our characters depending on which artifact we equipped. The more of one set the artifact we use, the stronger the empowerment. So let's do a quick little recap. We've learned that the artifacts are possibly intangible objects that are created from the memories of individuals from the past that originate from the ley lines, and when we equip our characters with them, we are actually supplanting these memories into our characters, which then empower them to get stronger. However, there are some flaws to this theory that I will try and rectify here. One thing that was brought to my attention while chatting in the Conrad Discord channel was the fact that there are NPCs that give us artifacts, and we can also get artifacts from treasure chests. Concerning the NPCs, the items that they give us are all 1 to 3 star artifacts, all of which do not have stories that are particular to one person, making them much more common and possibly still in use physically in present time. Just look at these names: Adventurer, Lucky Dog, Traveling Doctor, Berserker. None of these denote a single individual. Even their stories are incredibly general, telling a generic tale that a multitude of people could have. The 5 stars, however, are hyper-specific to the point where many lore theorists have already pinpointed the exact character to which the set is alluding to, like Signora and the Crimson Witch of Flames. Concerning chests, again, they only provide 1 to 3 star artifacts, which are all generic stories that could relate to any adventurer at present day. Even though they are all just called artifacts, the distinction between the 1 to 3 star artifacts and the 5 star artifacts is significant. But what about the 4 star variants? Simple, these are higher stature individuals from the past. There are also 2 4-star artifacts given to the Traveler as of version 2.1. Victoria from Mondstadt gives the Bloodstained Cavalier's Goblet, and Hiragi Chisato from Inazuma gives the Storm Cage. This could simply be because the owners of these artifacts had their possessions passed down, or that they survived history and made their way into the hands of our contributors, before being passed on to us. As is consistent with the theory, there should be a single physical set within our history as well, in our timeline. Another piece of evidence is that only 5-star artifacts are metaphysical, since you can only destroy 1 to 4-star artifacts and convert them into Mora. However, that still leaves the fact that you can obtain 1 5-star artifact in the game outside of the domains, and that is the Noblesse Royal Flora from the Kuiji... Gosh, I hate pronunciations in this game, man. Kuiji Slope. Yeah? Did I get it?
翠蕨. As a fun sidebar for this one, I've actually heard someone call this Coochie Slope.
I said that, didn't I? Damn it! Anyways, this place is where the 9 Pillars of Peace world quest is located. This one can be easily explained by the fact that we are using Stones of Remembrance, that contain memories, of course, to unlock a seal. When you unlock the seals on each pillar and then use Elemental Sight, the area actually around the seal remains lit up as if releasing elemental energy still. When we enter the temple, we fight a trial and then we receive the artifact, which I believe is created by the Stones of Remembrance and the pillars that appear to be connected to the ley lines. Another possible flaw can be bought from Tubby in the Serenity Teapot, called the Sanctifying Essence Potion, used to apply 10,000 experience to any artifact, and be careful because the auto upgrade button will use this item first before selecting the other artifacts. Its description reads, "Artifacts are themselves the physical manifestation of ideals and memories. Materials, such as this, which contain the distilled essence of the power thereof, can make these memories and ideals clearer and stronger still." And there you go, Keeper. This looks like a nail on the coffin because it clearly states that artifacts are physical manifestations. So Keeper, you just wasted our time with this video, didn't you? And to this I say, isn't the joy of theory crafting the journey and not the destination? Excuse me while I digress. If you read this description carefully, one can make the case that physical manifestation is not referring to the item itself, but is actually referring to the real object, and that the ideals and memories of the user were implanted into the physical item. Then the ley line would take a snapshot of that item and create reflections to be given out as blessings to any conquerors of the domains. Does this make sense? Because that's how I'm interpreting it. But of course, you are all free to interpret as you desire. Alright, we're about to go into some super speculative territory, so hold on to your butts, okay? Are you ready for this? I think that the artifacts actually support the idea that there are an infinite number of Teyvats, each one a leaf of the world tree, and that we are being blessed by the artifacts from any one of those other different Teyvats. Let me use Senora as another example for the 3rd time. Somewhere out there in the multiverse, there is a Senora that wore the Crimson Witch of Flames set, with perfect substats and a perfect main stat combination. There is also a Senora out there that wore a Crimson Witch of Flames set with god-awful substats and a useless main stat. There are Senoras that exist too, with every other combination of Crimson Witch of Flames set in between. Remember, we are simply inheriting a memory of the set. This would actually provide an explanation for the RNG nature of the artifacts, that it's not actually RNG, which I will go over in just a sec. And these are given to us, or blessed to us, by the Irminsul tree, which we invigorate with resin. Pretty wild, huh? This means that every artifact that you own is different from every single other artifact that every other player has, and there's actually a lore-centric reason for this. When you upgrade an artifact, you're merely revealing an artifact's original power. What in the actual fuck, Mihoyo? In conclusion, I feel really bad for the Senora that received my defense percent main stat, flat defense, HP percent energy recharge goblet, because no wonder she became a harbinger and left that shit behind. With all the shitty artifacts I've received as a blessing, I'm ready to become a harbinger too. So next time you get a shitty artifact, just remember, you can farm again and try and get a better one. But out in the multiverse, there's a person who just had to use that shit for the rest of their existence. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this, and share below your crappiest and best artifacts, because I'd love to see how far up or down the bar can go. Subscribe to the channel for more Genshin lore, and check out my eventual release of a narrative retelling of the story to cure your boredom in between events. And with that, I will see you all in the next one. Keeper out.